I got a few examples I want to run through, but obviously the elephant in the room. All right, so you were a president at Anheuser-Busch. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Bud Light has been the number one beer on planet Earth for like however many years. Anheuser-Busch is obviously an absolute monster. And you had some genius who came in probably with a Harvard degree. I like to make fun of Harvard on the show. And said, "Oh, we need to expand our consumer base. We're the number one beer on the planet Earth, but you know we don't have enough market share, so we need to expand it." And aligned with a kind of transgender. I mean, it's a man pretending to be a woman, so I don't even know how you would classify that. And obviously, the limited edition can, and she did the Instagram post and the whole thing, and it blew up. So just unpack that, walk us through it. What the hell happened with Bud Light?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm happy to do that, Bear. Like maybe even like before I get in the whole Bud Light issue, I'd like to probably like talk a little bit about like Anheuser-Busch and what I was doing with them for 11 years. Cause I wasn't at Anheuser-Busch when that happened, but I think critical to the story, I had experiences when I was at Anheuser-Busch and even saw the company change. Like when I first joined Anheuser-Busch at a business school in 2011, man, right in terms of the company's 10 principles, it was like a meritocracy. They would talk about one of the principles, like we hire the best, we want you to recruit the best, and we want people to recruit people better than themselves, at the organization. And then by the time that I left in early 2022, they had changed that principle from being about a meritocracy to you get judged based off the diversity of your team. And so that now became like the leading card. And of course, like diversity, it wasn't just like diversity of thought, but it was, of course, like the diversity had to be based off like the immutable characteristics that, people are born with. It's like, did you have the right sex and the right gender? And, did you have the right race on the team? That's what was starting to develop at the corporation. And that's, I think, like indicative of like some of the changes that I saw. So, when Anheuser-Busch became like the poster child of this, call it the backlash against companies getting involved in political and social issues, probably wasn't like totally surprised that they went down this track. And if you take a look at Anheuser-Busch, like go back to 2019, because that's like this pivotal year. 2019, Anheuser-Busch had one shareholder report, and it said, "Hey, we have one shareholder report, 100 pages long. This is how we add value. This is how we create value." But by 2022, they actually had two annual reports. One was a shareholder report, and two, they had an ESG report that was 130 pages long that talked about their environmental, social governance goals and everything that they're going to achieve as a corporation. And one of those things they were proudly talking about was that how they have a 100% score for like the Human Rights Coalition, which judges how well you do promoting, LGBTQ plus, initiatives. And they were kind of sold by the BlackRock, State Streets, and Vanguards of the world that like, hey, if you want to increase shareholder value, like, man, you need 100% scores on these like, Human Rights Coalition, scores. And, you guys need to be working with the World Economic Forum on, kind of more of a globalist agenda. And hey, you guys need to be working to figure out how you're going to decrease all of your like emissions on trucks and all this like silly stuff that has like nothing to do with actually just like producing like cold beer that consumers want to drink. So like you go back to like that setup, I would say like that was the kindling for this like absolute firestorm that happened when all of a sudden you have like a new brand manager at Bud Light that says like, okay, well, I got to keep these like high corporate equality index scores, and I got to like make sure that I have 100%, and I have to make sure that as Anheuser-Busch wants me to increase our diversity, equity, inclusion scores. I got a whole story about this. That like, how do I do that? Okay, well, Bud Light, which Bud Light had always been like, it was the biggest beer brand in the United States because it was remarkably apolitical. It was like a funny, humorous brand that, if you look at consumer research reports, Democrats and Republicans equally enjoyed and equally drank. It like, never got involved in political type things. And so like now all of a sudden, like we have this new brand manager that comes in, and in her mind, she has to like, increase Anheuser-Busch's ESG scores, diversity, equity, inclusion scores, everything else. How do I do that? Oh, I know. I'm going to take like the biggest brand that was funny, humorous, everyone loved. And now all of a sudden, like I'm going to try to like start sponsoring, like really small percentage groups that are frankly like very controversial in this country, like the whole like trans movement is incredibly controversial. It's like, Bear, I mean, it's crazy to say, like, you're a college linebacker in football, but like in the world we live in, like if you decide to identify as a woman, like you could theoretically like, gone out and started competing in like, women's boxing or women's sports or whatever else. But like that's the world we're living in. Like that stuff is controversial. Like doing gender affirmation care for kids under the age of 18, like very controversial in the US. So why would Anheuser-Busch decide to like put on the face of their can, like somebody who's incredibly controversial that like speaks to that agenda, that's kind of the face of that agenda, was at like, the Biden White House a couple months earlier pushing that agenda? Doesn't make any sense. Like it has nothing to do with shareholder value. And obviously, like that's exactly what happened because you had like, man, Anheuser-Busch lost millions of consumers. They lost billions of dollars of shareholder value, all in the name of trying to advance this ESG and DEI agenda. It had nothing to do with shareholder value. And at the end of the day, it's been bad for the company because they'd have to lay off hundreds of people. And, they still lost 30, 40% of their sales at this point.